There are places in America where people tell stories. Places where ghost stories are shared around campfires. Places where legends exist to entertain. The Appalachian Mountains are not one of those places. Because in Appalachia, stories are rarely treated like stories. They are treated like warnings. Warnings repeated so many times that nobody remembers who first said them. Warnings older than the people repeating them. Warnings that survived long after the reasons behind them were forgotten. Do not whistle after dark. Do not answer voices from the woods. Do not follow lights between the trees. Do not investigate strange sounds. And if something calls your name when you know you're alone, keep walking. The Appalachian Mountains stretch across more than 2,000 miles of eastern America. They are among the oldest mountains on Earth, older than every road crossing them, older than every town built among them, older than every person who has ever lived there. For thousands of years, people have disappeared into these forests. Hunters, travelers, children, entire search parties have walked beneath those trees. Some returned, some didn't. And over time, the mountains developed a reputation, not because of what people claimed to see, because of what people claimed to hear. Many Appalachian stories begin with a voice. A hunter hears someone calling from beyond the tree line. A camper hears footsteps circling their tent. A woman standing on her porch hears her name spoken from the darkness. The warning remains the same. Don't answer. Don't follow. Go inside. Lock your door and forget about it. The people who tell these stories rarely describe monsters. Instead, they describe something much worse. Something familiar, something that knows exactly what you expect to hear. A child crying, a friend calling for help. A relative asking your name. Something that sounds almost human. Almost. That word appears again and again throughout Appalachian folklore. Almost. Almost a person, almost a voice. Almost normal. Almost. Because, according to many stories, the most dangerous things in the mountains aren't the things that look strange. They're the things that look familiar. The things that get close enough to convince you. Close enough to make you take on one step in the wrong direction. And Appalachia is full of stories about people who followed something into the woods, then never came back. Perhaps that's why another strange rule survived. If the dogs don't like it, neither should you. Across the mountains, people tell stories about dogs refusing to leave porches after dark. Dogs growling at empty forests. Dogs staring into tree lines for hours. Dogs refusing to enter certain parts of the woods. Owners often describe the same thing. The animal notices something first. Something the humans can't see. Something the humans don't notice until much later. A sound. Movement behind trees. A feeling. Many families living in isolated mountain communities learned long ago to trust their animals. Not because animals understand what they're seeing, but because they notice danger long before people do. And some Appalachian stories suggest there are dangers that animals recognize immediately. The same cannot always be said for people. Perhaps that's why another warning survived. Never whistle after dark. Nobody agrees where the rule came from. Some say, Whistling attracts attention. Others say it tells something where you are. Many refuse to explain at all. They simply repeat the warning. Don't do it. And the older the person giving the warning, the less likely they are to laugh while they're saying it. Visitors often assume these stories are exaggerations until they notice something strange. The people telling them actually follow the rules themselves. Curtains are closed before dark. Windows remain covered. Porches sit empty at night. Strange noises outside are ignored. A knock at the door after midnight often goes unanswered. Not because anyone expects to see a monster, because there is no reason to open the door, especially if whoever is outside already knows you're there. And perhaps that's what makes Appalachian folklore different from ordinary horror stories. Most horror stories end. Appalachian warnings continue. Generation after generation. Parent to child. Neighbor to neighbor. Hunter to hunter. The stories survive because the rules survive. And the rules survive because every now and then something happens that reminds people why they exist. One of the most famous examples happened in June of 1969. A 6-year-old boy named Dennis Martin disappeared in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The day began normally. Families had gathered in the park. Children were playing. Adults, they were nearby. Nothing seemed unusual. Dennis and several other children decided to play a game. The plan was simple. Hide and wait. Jump out and surprise the adults. The children split up. Dennis ran toward a patch of trees. And that was the last confirmed sighting of him. One moment he was there. The next moment he was gone. Search efforts began almost immediately. Volunteers flooded into the mountains. Park rangers joined the search. Military personnel arrived. Hundreds of people combed through the wilderness. The search became one of the largest in the park's history. Days passed, then weeks. No trace, no explanation, and no answer. Dennis Martin was never found. The mountains kept their silence. And for many people living in Appalachia, that silence became part of the story. Because Dennis Martin wasn't the first person to disappear among those mountains, and he wouldn't be the last. As the years passed, Dennis Martin became one of the many names connected to the mountains. Not because every disappearance was mysterious, not because every missing person case lacked an explanation, but because the mountains have a way of making certainty disappear. The Appalachian wilderness covers an enormous portion of the eastern United States. Millions of acres of forest, deep valleys, remote ridges, places where a person can walk for hours without seeing another human being. Places where a wrong turn can become a fatal mistake. And over the decades, countless people have vanished there. Some were experienced hikers, some were hunters. Some knew the land better than anyone. Yet, every year, new names are added to the list. Missing, never located, never fully explained. For many people living in Appalachia, those disappearances became woven into the stories. Not because anyone could prove what happened, because unanswered questions have a way of surviving, especially in mountains that rarely offer answers. The forests themselves seem designed to hide things. A person can be standing less than 50 feet away and disappear behind trees. Sound behaves strangely. Distances become difficult to judge. Voices travel in unexpected directions. At night, the woods become something else entirely. Locals notice, visitors often learn it too late. That is why so many Appalachian warnings focus on sound. Not sight, sound. Because seeing something strange is rare. Hearing something strange is common. A voice, a whistle, footsteps, branches breaking, something moving beyond the tree line. Many stories describe hearing conversations in places where no conversations should exist. Campers lying awake in their tents. Hunters sitting quietly before sunrise. People standing outside after dark, listening. Certain stories describe hearing two people speaking somewhere, deep in the forest, close enough to hear, too far away to understand. The natural reaction is curiosity. Who is out there? Why are they here? But old Appalachian warnings suggest a different response. Leave immediately. Do not investigate. Do not call out. Do not go looking. Because some things are easier to hear than they are to find. And some things are easier to find than they should be. The stories become stranger after dark. Many mountain communities have their own versions of a similar warning. If somebody knocks on your door late at night, think carefully before answering. To outsiders, the rule sounds paranoid. To some families, it sounds practical. There are stories throughout Appalachia of people hearing knocks long after midnight. 3 knocks, sometimes 4. Sometimes a slow tapping against a window. A porch, a wall, a door. The person inside looks outside. Nobody is there. The stories rarely explain what caused the sound. They focus on something else. The decision. The choice between opening the door and leaving it closed. Many families choose to leave it closed. And the same logic extends to windows. Visitors often notice curtains drawn unusually early, before sunset, before darkness fully arrives. The explanation is often simple. There is nothing outside worth looking at. And if something outside wants your attention, it already has it. That attitude appears again and again throughout Appalachian folklore. Attention matters, looking matters, responding matters. The mountains are filled with stories that begin when somebody decides to investigate. A sound, a voice, a movement. Something just beyond tree lines. Something just beyond the trees. And every year, new stories are added. Perhaps that is why mimic legends became so deeply rooted in the region. Because mimic stories combine every fear the mountains already create. Isolation, darkness, distance, and uncertainty. According to countless stories, certain things in the woods do not hunt by chasing people. They hunt by attracting them. A familiar voice, a cry for help, a friend calling from somewhere nearby. Something designed to make you move toward it. One step, then another, then another. The details vary depending on who tells the story, but the pattern remains remarkably consistent. The voice never sounds completely wrong. If it did, nobody would follow it. The voice sounds almost right. Almost. Close enough to trust, close enough to make a person hesitate. And sometimes hesitation is all it takes. There are stories of hunters hearing family members calling from impossible locations. Stories of people hearing loved ones who were miles away. Stories of names being spoken from deep forests where nobody should have been standing. And perhaps the most unsettling detail is this. Many of those stories are told by people who never went looking. People who heard the voice, ignored it, and lived long enough to tell somebody else about it. Which may explain why the warning survived. Do not answer. Not because the voice is dangerous, but because whatever is making it wants you to believe it isn't. The mountains teach that lesson repeatedly. Trust what you know. Trust where you are. Trust who is supposed to be there. Nothing else, especially after dark. Because once the sun disappears behind the ridges, Appalachia becomes a different place. A place where distance feels wrong. A place where sound feels wrong. A place where many people become convinced they are no longer alone. And according to countless stories, sometimes they aren't. For many people outside Appalachia, the most famous stories involve creatures. The names change depending on where you are. The details change depending on who is telling the story. But one idea appears again and again. There are things in the mountains that are not what they appear to be. Perhaps the best known modern example is something called the not there. The name sounds almost ridiculous until you hear people describe it. Witnesses rarely begin by saying they saw a monster. They begin by saying they saw a deer. A completely ordinary deer standing near the road. A deer at the edge of a clearing. A deer watching from the tree line. Then they notice something is wrong. The proportions don't look right. The eyes, they seem wrong. The movements feel unnatural for a deer. Sometimes the animal appears too aware, too focused, too interested. People often describe the same feeling. The overwhelming certainty that they are not looking at an animal. They are looking at something that's pretending to be one. And according to many stories, that realization arrives all at once. A single moment, a single glance, the instant when something familiar suddenly becomes unfamiliar. The mountains are full of stories like that. Things that almost fit, things that almost belong, things that almost make sense. Almost. The word appears constantly throughout Appalachian folklore. Almost human, almost an animal, almost normal, almost. And perhaps that is what makes these stories so effective. The danger is never obvious. The danger hides inside something familiar. A voice, a face, a deer standing among trees. A sound outside your house. Something that appears ordinary long enough to make you lower your guard. Many people assume Appalachian legends revolve around creatures. The people who live there often seem more concerned with behavior. what you should do, what you should avoid, which rules matter. Because according to countless stories, survival depends less on understanding what exists in the mountains and more on knowing how to respond when you encounter it. Do not answer, do not investigate, do not follow, do not invite attention. The warnings are simple, the consequences are not. Perhaps that explains why the stories have survived for so long. Generations came and went, entire towns appeared and disappeared, roads were built, forests were cut down, new forests grew back, technology arrived, the internet arrived, yet somehow the warnings remained unchanged. The same mountains, the same rules, the same unease. And perhaps the most unsettling part is this. Many legends disappear when people stop believing them. Appalachian legends never really disappeared. They adapted. A story told around a fireplace becomes a story shared online. A warning passed from a grandfather becomes a warning repeated by thousands of strangers. The medium changes, the message does not. Do not answer the voices, do not whistle after dark, do not follow what calls from the trees. Because even now, there are people living in Appalachia who follow those rules without question. People who close their curtains before sunset. People who refuse to walk certain trails after dark. People who stop speaking when certain subjects are mentioned. People who have spent their entire lives in the mountains and still treat them with caution. Not fear, respect. The kind of respect people reserve for things they know are far older than themselves. Perhaps that is what outsiders misunderstand. The mountains are not frightening because of a single creature. They are frightening because they feel alive. Not alive in the way an animal is alive. Alive in the sense that they do not care about you. The mountains were there before the roads, before the towns, before the stories, before every single missing person, before every search party, before every witness. And long after every story has been forgotten, the mountains will still be there, silent, watching, waiting. That may be why so many people leave Appalachia with the same feeling. The feeling that something exists just beyond the edge of understanding. Something glimpsed between the trees. Something heard but never seen. Something known only through warnings. And warnings, unlike stories, are not created for entertainment. Warnings exist because somebody learned a lesson and then made sure somebody else wouldn't have to learn it in the same way. That may be the most disturbing part of Appalachian folklore. Not the creatures, not the voices, not the disappearances. The fact that the rules survived. Nobody knows who first spoke them. Nobody knows how old some of them truly are. Yet they remain. Passed from one generation to the next. Do not answer, do not follow, do not whistle, do not look. The mountains have been teaching the same lesson for centuries. And there are still people who listen. Because deep in Appalachia, when the sun disappears behind the ridges, when the roads became empty, when the forest becomes silent, many people still choose to follow the rules. Just in case, because if the stories are wrong, nothing happens. But if the stories are right, The mountains may be the last place you ever hear your name.